Good morning. Our topic today is unique and included. Reverend Sunshine Day, I have to share this lovely story. Sunshine is married to her partner, and they both changed their first and their last names, so their names are Sunshine and Sunny Day. Isn't that great? I always love that. Likes to ask the question, and I love the question, who is a stranger to you? When we're out in the world, who is a stranger to us? I had a wonderful experience, 2 different experiences this week. I love when topics become animated in my personal world. I was in the grocery store in the line to check out last night, and I, being nosy as I can often be, I was just looking at what the person behind me was buying. And I'm like, oh, that looks like your meal for tonight. And he said, yeah, I don't have much of a repertoire. My wife died last August, and I'm learning how to make meals for myself. I don't know what. So anyway, make meals for myself. And he said, I really, really miss her. We were married for 62 years. We were together for 3 years before that, so we were together 65 years. A part of me is missing, and it's just very hard. And so I'm just learning how. And so we just had this incredible moment and just being with him, and he was talking about his family coming the next day and how she died so quickly, and I heard about that. He just clearly wanted to share. And it was this moment of deep connection and love. A few days earlier, I had met another person that was new to me, and we were talking, and we had shared common interest in grandchildren, and not mine, his, and not that I know of anyway. And he said, well, no, he was just visiting. And he said, well, the real reason I'm visiting is my grandmother, who is 98, is in hospice, and I'm a minister, and I wanted to come up and be with her. And I said, oh, that's lovely, you're coming in to bless her as she makes her transition. And he said, well, not really, that's not my purpose. She hasn't accepted Jesus into her life, and so I need to let her know that Jesus is not going to let her into heaven unless she accepts him. This was a different conversation. And I had to breathe. And I just shared that I didn't believe that, and we had our little conversation about what I believed. And I said, well, did she have a good heart? Was she kind? Oh, yes, she was very kind and very loving. And I said, well, and we had a clear conversation about his perspectives and my perspectives, and that they were different. And then we just breathed and went back to grandchildren, which was a much safer topic. Who is a stranger to us? One was a stranger, and yet in a moment, through his sharing of his heart and his soul, we became instantly connected. And another one I felt very separate from. I felt very much like you live in a different universe than I live in. Crueler, more exclusive, and all the judgments that come up. Who is a stranger to us? Who is a stranger to you? Have you had these experiences? I feel like these are just my microcosm of what we're experiencing all the time. People in our world who have very different beliefs about and values, that we're all living in this world. And yet we come here to this beautiful community, and we talk about our oneness, and that we are one with everybody. That in fact, in knowing our oneness with all beings, and knowing that the source of all of us is one and the same, wherever we go, we feel at home. It doesn't matter what place we're with or who we're with, we're one because we know the one source and the one power. And that's what we talk about and bask in and pray about, and then I go and have a conversation that takes me out of that in a minute. And this can be a little bit of our journey with uniqueness and diversity, is that it asks us to say, well, we are one, but we're not the same. And that takes some understanding. The high school I went to was 50% African American, 50% white, Caucasian, and even, obviously there's diversity within that. The volleyball team, I played on the varsity volleyball team. There was 3 white people, and the rest were people of color. That never even dawned on me until years later. It was just normal. However, I did have an experience, and I was part of a group called Student Groups, a group on race relations, and they created, it was my classmates, and then I joined in, going back to elementary schools and having them do improvs and skits about the challenges that they were going to experience when they went to middle school with these different racial divisions and how to deal with it. And it was extraordinary. It lasted for years after we left. It was an incredible group. So I felt very progressive, very liberal, very open. But I never once thought about that. We're still sort of, even though there was the diversity, it was still primarily a white culture and white values. And I didn't really catch that until on the weekends, I went to parties with friends. And often, whenever I went to those parties, they were primarily white people with African Americans, but the primary group was white. Never dawned on me until I was with my friend who was on the varsity volleyball team, who African American. We couldn't find the party that we both knew about, so she took me to another party, and it was all African American, and I was the only white person. And it was very different, and I felt very uncomfortable. And I felt uncomfortable that I felt uncomfortable. Because how I perceived myself was, this shouldn't bother me. I'm not prejudiced. I don't think I'm better. Why do I feel so uncomfortable in a group of people that I go to school with with all of them? Why do I feel uncomfortable? It took me a long time, literally years, before I would really fully own that experience. I was too embarrassed to admit it. I certainly wasn't going to admit it to my friend at that moment, that I felt uncomfortable being the only white person there. I felt ashamed that I felt that way. And yet it was through doing that work of really saying, well, how is the African American community different than the white community? Well, I can just say in this particular instance, I never went to one party in my high school career where white people were dancing. When I went to the African American party, everyone was dancing. One very obvious difference, but there's a lot of, so I really started looking at the African American culture and embracing it in my heart and my soul. So in the future, when I was in that situation, and I was socially, where I was one of the few white people, I felt completely at home. But I had to learn about people that were different than me. We're all one, and yet the way we show up is unique and different. And the more we become aware of that, the more inclusive we get in our understanding and welcoming other people. Reverend Nirvana Gale, who was one of my mentor ministers at Agape, who's African American, when you're in the minority group, you become aware of that, because the minority group of whatever that is acclimating themselves to the majority, so they're used to it. Often I'm in the majority. When we're in the majority, we don't always know that we're excluding others. I had this interaction with Reverend Nirvana when I first met him. We were just talking, and he was saying something. He goes, "Hey, baby," and he just went on. He goes, "Oh, wait, I'm so sorry. Was that offensive to you? I know that's part of my culture, and we mean that as a term of endearment and respect, but I know that's not part of the white culture, and I don't want to disrespect you." And it shocked me that he was so conscious of his language and that he had just crossed a cultural norm, because I hadn't thought about it, but no white man has ever called me baby before, that was a cultural difference. And he consciously acknowledged it, asked me if he was being disrespectful. I said, "No, that's totally fine. I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable with it." And he said, "Okay, good. And if there's anything that I say that feels uncomfortable to you, please let me know." This was 20 years ago. Just that level of conscious awareness that I am in a different culture and I have a different way of talking, and that we start to acknowledge that. When I am constantly in the majority, I don't often realize that I am in that, and so I talk that is a way that's familiar to me. I had another experience, and I'm sure you all have these experiences as well. And it's the fact that I point to these experiences shows that they stand out, because primarily I am in the majority. I remember sitting at a dinner table with a bunch of people, and I noticed I was feeling uncomfortable. The conversation was different. The tenor was different. And then it just dawned on me as I was sitting there, I was one of the only straight people at the table. And it never dawned on me that the conversation with a group of a big table of people that are primarily straight and the people who identify with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender is a different conversation, a different style of conversation. I never knew that. And I'm not saying it always is. I'm just saying in that moment, and again, I was embarrassed, wasn't going to say anything. I shouldn't feel this way. Part of our journey, this extraordinary journey, is learning to be able to say that I feel uncomfortable in this moment. It's not because I'm feeling superior, I just feel uncomfortable. And for us, if someone says that to us, to hear that and listen and say, why are you feeling uncomfortable? What am I not seeing? We all have so much learning to do about other cultures, about other ways of being. And even as we're talking about this collectively, then within just even this one little room right here, every one of us is unique. Nobody is doing their spiritual path in the same way that somebody else is doing it. We have different, Science of Mind, Centers for Spiritual Living, even 20 years ago, there was a lot more homogeneousness. There was a lot of more, when you went to a CSL, everyone was practicing Ernest Holmes and Science of Mind. It's becoming more heterogeneous. People who come to our communities practice all sorts of things, and are not necessarily primarily focused and identified with Ernest Holmes. The identity is increasing. God is all of it. The infinite love intelligence is all of it. And the more we recognize it, the more diversity that we have and we draw in. And so we need to be listening to each and every one and hearing that they are not us. That every person that I'm talking to is not a reflection of me. Each and every one of you have your own unique way of saying and seeing and perceiving and experiencing. And to really hear each other is to put my perspective aside and hear. Constant learning. With all of this, there can be a feeling of disappointment. We haven't had a lot of these conversations in our own community yet, but these are conversations that happen a lot within our ministers' community. There's a lot happening right now about embracing diversity. And there's definitely people who feel that we've gotten away from the message of oneness, that the focus is now, how is everybody different? What this group needs, what that group needs. And there's people who feel like, no, I am here to practice oneness, and I don't want to do that. And there's always degrees. So the whole conversation, it's very rich. And what I hear is a disappointment, and I feel sometimes a disappointment too. Like, I don't want to be talking about how everybody is different all the time. I want to feel that connection. And I was being with that idea of just sometimes, and even you may feel this, your own uniqueness, you feel a little bit more separate. Loneliness is in epidemic proportion right now. People are feeling, as we individuate, evolution is becoming more and more individuated, individually and collectively. There's all these groups, and people are feeling more separate than they've ever felt before. That natural inherent, we think alike, we're connected because we have the same values, is getting harder. So we're practicing oneness, and that oneness seems to be evolving in form into greater diversity, uniqueness, and separation. And what we're here to know is our oneness, not our separation. So how do we be with that? How do we be with the oneness and the wholeness and not feeling separation in our uniqueness and our diversity? Sometimes we just try to overflow that and say, well, we're all one. You know, we're diverse, but we're all one. And we just sort of disacknowledge the uniqueness. What I'm learning is it's to go into that feeling of separation that actually leads me to the oneness. I read an article this morning. I wasn't planning on talking about Palm Sunday. A minister posted it. It's the most brilliant article. I would have done my whole talk on it had I had more time to read it and think about it. And I will post it on my Facebook page. I encourage you all to read it. It's fabulous. In the article, the gentleman writing it, so when you read it, I'm not doing it justice, but remember I read it fast. He has struggled with chronic illness recently. His arms started tingling and started getting worse and numb. He's a writer, and his hands were getting numb, and he's going to all these doctors, and they couldn't diagnose it. And he tells the challenge of having now this chronic illness. And he said he's joining over 25 million Americans suffer from chronic illness. And there's a word that I can't, dystopia? I don't remember. I'm sorry that I don't remember the word. Where there is no cause. This chronic illness that people are experiencing where doctors cannot find a cause. Over 25 million Americans. And he said his experience of that was this incredible disappointment in God. He said, God knows me. I've prayed to God. God knows my journey. Why this? Why bother me with this? Why am I getting this? And why isn't the cause being revealed? Why isn't the path to my healing, cure, let's talk cure, isn't showing up? And he related it to Palm Sunday. This is brilliant. Oh, he also mentioned, this is the part that really got me. He was reading in some article that these researchers were saying disappointment is one of the greatest struggles that we go through emotionally. Disappointment. I don't think of disappointment as being that bad. They're saying it's one of the greatest emotional struggles that we go through. They say the reason why disappointment is so hard is because we have an expectation of something working out. So when it doesn't work out, often it does, but when it doesn't work out, we're doubly disappointed. A, it didn't work out, and B, we expected it to, so we were wrong. And those two things, they were saying dopamine levels just drop, and we physiologically feel that sense of disappointment. Things are not what I thought it was to be. I thought the divine was going to answer this. I thought the law was going to manifest this. I thought this is what was going to happen, and it didn't happen the way I wanted it to be. Expectations are crashed. Palm Sunday. Jesus invites there's palms as he's going into Jerusalem. You may not know, I did not know until I read this article. 200 years earlier, Judas Maccabeus came into Jerusalem as their savior, as their king, freed them from Syria, and the Jewish people were free for the next century because he came in and freed them. So the palm leaves return to this idea of, here's Jesus, he's going to come save us. The Savior is coming. They're excited. He's just healed Lazarus in Bethany. Word is spreading. This guy can do miracles. He can raise the dead. He's going to deliver the Jewish people from the oppressors, the Roman people. There is this thrill. And then the idea of a donkey. Also in the Old Testament, that their Savior, their King, would come to Jerusalem on a donkey. So he had all these things. Hosanna, Hosanna. This King, he's going to come and save us. And there's great joy on Palm Sunday. The expectation is so high. And then they discover that he isn't there to save them in the way that they thought he was going to save them. The expectation crashes. And what happens when our expectation of someone or something, including ourselves, crashes? We get really angry, whether it's at God, at ourselves, at the other person, at the situation. It's not supposed to be this way, and that disappointment, that betrayal, we can lash out. I'm angry. This isn't the way it was supposed to be. So we get into the crucifixion story. Crucify him. We're angry. You're not who you said you were being. You were supposed to be the king. You did all this stuff. And what this guy was saying, I don't know if any of this is true. I just think it's a great story. I hope it's true, let me just say. I just don't know. Well, I do know there's some truth because I've experienced it. He was saying, but I don't know if this is true, that Jesus intentionally was doing that. He was intentionally setting everybody's expectations up to disillusion them, to have people become free of all their illusions of what power was, about what freedom meant, about what people thought the way things should look. And he, in one experience, through this whole passion of the Christ, of the crucifixion and the resurrection, had people crash and then realize beyond that crash there's still this light that is more powerful and more real and more beautiful than they could ever possibly imagine, that being free from the Roman Empire would have never given them. That freedom from the Roman Empire was nothing compared to what he was giving them. But they could not see it We cannot see it sometimes when we have expectations of what we think our good looks like. God doesn't give us what we expect. God gives us what we need if we really want to know God, the divine presence within us. He crashed all those expectations so they can make space. That time in the tomb makes space for this entirely new revelation to reveal itself. How extraordinary is that? As we are on this journey, everywhere we go, we feel differences and separation. It's becoming more and more so, whether it's collectively, group-wise, individually. But it's only separation because we identify with a certain way we're supposed to be. Looking at it differently, when we go out into nature and we see a lot of different colored birds, and we see one we've never seen before, we go, ew. We don't go, ew, that's a new bird, I've never seen that one, and reject it. We get excited. Look at that new bird, I've never seen a bird like that before. We love diversity, but why? We're not threatened by the diversity when we're out in nature. We just think it's part of God's amazing, beautiful plan. Humanly, we can get threatened by all the uniqueness that's surrounding us because we think that invalidates who we are. It invalidates our own self-worth. When we start to recognize that all this diversity is just this extraordinary beauty of a divine presence that sources all of us, and that we are just as much a part of that and just as much as part of that uniqueness and essentialness as every other unique expression, our heart begins to open. One of Ken Wilber's criticisms of the New Thought world was that he felt that so much of when we talked about oneness, we were talking about oneness on a surface orient. Oh, we're one because we all feel the same philosophy, or we all feel the same. But we're not the same. We're all different. And as we go deeper and deeper, and as we look and we become more of a global culture, as we are, we're going to feel those differences more and more and more. And it's the greatest gift we could ever have because it's asking us to know true oneness, not oneness based on our personality, not oneness based on my upbringing, my religious orientation, not oneness based on my culture, not oneness based on my skin's color. Those are all superficial orientations of oneness. What all of this is demanding us to do is go deeper into our oneness, go deeper into that oneness that transcends all temporary relative expressions. So the gift, every time we feel a separation, is to not try to force a connection, is to actually just let go and surrender into that which transcends it. This past week, I was in an experience. I think all of you have these experiences too. I'm sharing it in the hopes that you make connections with the experiences that you have that are similar to this. I'm with a group of people. We basically have the same idea. It's really fun. I feel very vital and alive and joyful because it's a topic that I feel very comfortable with and masterful of. And I love that feeling, and I embrace it, and it's fun to express it and share it and hear other people, and it's wonderful. I was in another group of people where I felt completely at bay, that I felt less than. Their whole way of being, what they were talking about, I didn't relate to at all. I didn't feel connected. I wanted to reject them and just walk away and they're just boring. Because that's what we do when we're around differences of people. So in that moment, I was just noticing that I was feeling less than because I couldn't participate in it. I thought it was boring because I couldn't participate. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I haven't had a history in the topic that they were talking about. So I just stood there and just surrendered. And I felt into my not enoughness, that their uniqueness, their way of showing up was making me feel less than because I didn't feel part of the group, and I couldn't feel part of the group because I didn't know what they were talking about. And I just sat there and I surrendered into the not enoughness, and I kept surrendering into the divine presence. I wasn't even asking to see the divine presence within them. I wanted to see it. I didn't even want to see it. I was just surrendering. I just surrender these feelings of not enoughness, of separation, that I don't belong, that I'm not included. And in that, and I see the divine presence within me, and that I'm still loved and I'm still cared for. I was just allowing me to see me in the midst of feeling so completely separate. And suddenly they started turning to me and including me in their conversation. That by the end of the conversation, I felt very included and almost more happy than I had been previously in other situations because I was so surprised at their response, and that suddenly where I felt so completely disconnected and then felt connected. That was not through an outer force of trying to find ways where we find similar passions or similar interests and having conversations and asking questions to try to find where I belong in this group. It was from letting go and surrendering. And isn't that really what this process of Holy Week is for what Jesus modeled? Was he was letting go and surrendering. He didn't come in to fight for freedom, to aggressively force his way on someone else, but to surrender into all the places where he was being seen separate, where he was being told that you're not being it the way you're supposed to be it, and he didn't fight it. He just surrendered, and in that continued surrender and surrender and surrender, we go deeper and deeper beyond form, beyond all those of our five senses, all that we can see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, all phenomena into that divine, infinite, invisible presence that is the source of all of us, where we go beyond concept, where we go beyond ideas and theologies. Theologies separate. I just have to point out, the reading today was intentional. We had a reading that was from Ernest Holmes that was very New Thought, and the following reading was very sort of Christians, a feeling of separation. And yet they're talking about the exact same thing, but they had different theologies of how to speak about it. So we can feel separation in theology, even though we're saying the same thing. They're not saying it the way I say it, so it's wrong, or it's less than, or it's other, or we're saying it different, so we're wrong, we're less than. So beyond concept, beyond form, we have to get beyond words, beyond thought, into that transcendent state, because that is the only place where we really genuinely know our true and free oneness with each other. Our oneness is not something that is humanly created. It is something that we cannot see, taste, touch, or smell, and it's the greatest gift to sink into that. Every opportunity that we get to that oneness, we feel, as was said in the reading today, the ecstatic oneness that we're seeking. I think this world is not only lonely, we are seeking intimacy. I think as I talk with people and in my own life, intimacy is where we find our greatest joy, where we feel that deepest connection with each other and with the divine. And that comes from that deepest, most satisfying, most fulfilling intimacy comes through and as pure spirit. More powerfully, profoundly, blissfully than any other source. So the more we can connect with the divine within us and connect the divine within each other, we start to feel that deep intimacy and at the same time celebrating and delighting in our uniqueness as much as we delight in the uniqueness out in nature. And we start seeing in awe who each and every individual is and how unique the divine is showing up and delighting in it individually and collectively, whether it's race, culture, sexual orientation, we delight in it. It's joyful and wonderful. I have to say one caveat before we close. It's not a negative it's just a clear. I absolutely celebrate uniqueness and everyone's individual way of expressing. I am very uncomfortable when someone says their uniqueness is better than someone else's, and they try to impose their beliefs. So if it's me trying to impose my values on somebody else, and they're doing it wrong, as when that gentleman was saying that woman wasn't going to go to heaven because she hadn't accepted Jesus Christ, I had to say something. I'm totally okay with him having a different religious belief than my religious belief. That's fine. But when we start imposing our belief, especially on people that are vulnerable, that don't have that inner strength for whatever reason, we speak up. And there's different levels. In that particular occasion, I spoke up, but I was being respectful. He was a relative of somebody. It wasn't my place to get into a long theological debate with him. But I did speak up, and then we let it be. There are other times where we want to speak up more, when we see groups being hurt or harmed or endangered because of laws or systems or cultural biases. We need to speak up. Diversity is about allowing every individual and collective group to fully express themselves without hurting other people. Unique and included. Everybody is included in the diversity. Everybody is included in the diversity. We are all included because not ultimately, in the Alpha and the Omega and everything in between is this powerful oneness that pulsates and vibrates as each and every one of us. Unique and included. The divine is this wonderful paradox life of uniqueness and oneness. And we are so blessed to be at this time of history where it's asking us, demanding of us to dive deeper than we've ever dived before, because the healing of our country and our planet cannot happen if we are not seriously doing our work to know that we are one in the midst of all of our radiant uniqueness. Let's pray. And how grateful we are to just bask in this glorious awareness that whatever all of our thoughts are, everyone is having their own unique thoughts right now, perceptions, that whatever that is, whatever these are, behind all of our thoughts, behind the field of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field, and I will meet you there. That this one power and this one presence transcends all of our thoughts and of all of our opinions and perspectives. It is what it is regardless of what our thoughts and our perspectives are. It is always good. It is always love. It is always wholeness. It is always peace. It is always joy where there is no opposite. It transcends all human form, all human ideas, all human concepts. Each and every one of us are vehicles of this divine one. Each and every one of us are a beautiful expression of this divine one. And as we see the form of each and every individual, ourselves and everybody else, we delight in all the diversity. We delight in it. We are humbled by it. We continue to grow by it. Each and every one of us are growing in this day to know and feel into the oneness and the uniqueness of every person with whom we come in contact. It's an extraordinary journey that is never ending. There's always something new to learn. For the infinite is infinite. It is never done. And so we get to delight in the infinite expression of pure spirit as all form, as every person with whom we come in contact today. We delight in their uniqueness. We look for their beautiful new way of shining that we've never seen before. Colors and expressions that we've never known. And at the same time, we feel the depth of our unity, of our oneness, because we know of our own universality and pure spirit. We feel it and see it in each and every individual. What a glorious life to be living. What a glorious prayer to know that we are always that prayer that accepts all beings. For we know that there is one and the many, many and the one. We live that divine paradox individually, each and every one of us individually, living this glorious paradox of our oneness with all life and our uniqueness. We are at home wherever we go. We are madly intimate in connected with each and every individual with whom we come in contact, and yet we've never met them before. We are learning who they are breath by breath. What an extraordinary adventure that we give to ourselves this very day. Thank you, divine, infinite love, intelligence of the universe, for giving us this wonderful, glorious gift. Thank you, divine love, intelligence, for opening our hearts and softening our hearts in our divine willingness to open and see and say and say and say over again, yes, 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 to every individual and group with whom we come in contact. Yes, yes. My heart is open in unconditional, unlimited, unbounded love. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that presence and that power of love that gives me the courage and the strength to open beyond places I never thought I could, to see walls that I didn't even know were there, separation that I didn't even know existed. Thank you, love. Thank you, love. Thank you, love, for opening and opening and opening and opening so that we truly know our oneness and a love that knows no end. This is the greatest gift. And for all of this love and all of this good, I just say thanks. And we release this law of love, knowing that as we have known it and felt it and experienced it, it is done. And in deep and abiding gratitude and everlasting peace, we say together, and so it is. Amen and amen.